The phone rang at 7:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, and by the time I hung up, I knew my daughter-in-law had just made the biggest mistake of her life. I'm Maxwell Wallace, 62 years old, and I fix electrical problems for a living. Well, I used to. Been retired for 3 years now, but old habits die hard. When something's not working right, I troubleshoot it. And standing in my kitchen in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with my coffee getting cold, and my neighbor Beverly Martinez on the other end of the line, I could feel that familiar tingle in my gut that meant I had a serious problem to solve. "Maxwell, honey," Beverly said, and I could hear that careful tone she uses when she's got bad news. "I need to tell you something about Tiffany." Tiffany. My son Donovan's wife, the woman who'd been part of our family for 5 years, who called me Dad Wallace and brought potato salad to every family barbecue. The woman who'd hugged me at my wife Margaret's funeral 2 years ago and promised she'd always be there for family. "What about her?" I asked, though something in my chest already knew I didn't want the answer. "She was at my door yesterday morning, asking some real strange questions about you. Wanted to know if I'd noticed you getting forgetful lately, if you'd been having trouble with your tools or your truck. Asked if I thought you were—" What was the word she used? Declining. I set my mug down slowly. Declining. That's not the worst part, Maxwell. She had this folder with her, real official looking, and she kept writing things down when I answered, like she was documenting something. The kitchen went quiet except for the hum of my refrigerator and the tick of Margaret's old wall clock. 37 years I'd been married to that woman. She left me this house, a small electrical supply business worth about $90,000, and a $140,000 life insurance policy that was supposed to keep me comfortable until my time came. "Beverly, did she say why she was asking?" A pause. She said the family was concerned. Said, "Donovan was worried about you living alone in this big house, managing your business affairs. Said they might need to look into getting you some help." Help. Right. I thanked Beverly and hung up. But I didn't move from that kitchen for a good 10 minutes. I just stood there, thinking about Tiffany, how she'd been paying extra attention to me lately, asking about my finances, my business, whether I'd updated my will recently, and how she'd offered to help me organize my paperwork, said it must be overwhelming for a man my age to handle alone. A man my age. I'm 62, not 92. I can still wire a house faster than most guys half my age, and my doctor told me last month I've got the blood pressure of a 40-year-old. But apparently to Tiffany, I was declining. I picked up my phone and called my old union buddy Jerry Patterson. Jerry spent 30 years as an electrician before becoming an insurance investigator. If anyone could tell me what I was dealing with, it was Jerry. "Patterson Investigations," he answered, even though he'd been retired for 4 years. "Old habits. Jerry, it's Maxwell. I need some advice about something, and it's not about electrical work." "What's going on, Max?" I told him everything Beverly had said. Jerry listened without interrupting, which is what good investigators do. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Maxwell, you mind if I come over? This sounds like something we should discuss face to face." 20 minutes later, Jerry was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a grim expression. I'd filled in more details. How Tiffany had been taking pictures during family gatherings whenever I looked tired or confused about something. How she'd started speaking louder around me, like I was hard of hearing. How she'd offered to drive me to my last doctor's appointment because it's better to be safe. "Maxwell," Jerry said, stirring his coffee like he was buying time. "What you're describing sounds like someone building a case." "What kind of case?" "The kind where they try to prove you're not capable of managing your own affairs. It's called a competency challenge. If they can get a court to declare you mentally incompetent, they can take control of your finances, your property, everything." The words hit me like touching a live wire. That's legal? If they can prove it, yeah. And the scary part is, they don't need much. A few documented incidents of forgetfulness, some testimony from concerned family members, maybe a geriatric consultant's report about declining mental state. Jerry looked at me directly. "Maxwell, when's the last time Tiffany was in your house alone?" I thought about it. Sunday dinner, 3 weeks ago. She helped clean up, said she wanted to give me a break. Spent some time in my office looking for aluminum foil, she said. My home office, where I keep all my business records, insurance documents, Margaret's life insurance policy information, where Tiffany had spent about 20 minutes looking for aluminum. foil while I was outside grilling burgers for the family. Son of a gun, I muttered. Jerry nodded slowly. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to start documenting everything. Every conversation, every visit, every strange question. And we're going to do some investigating of our own. That's when I found out about Curtis's birthday party. My grandson, Donovan, and Tiffany's boy had turned 20 the previous Saturday. They'd thrown him a party at their place in Marion, invited all his friends from trade school. I'd been there, of course. Brought Curtis a new set of Klein tools and spent the afternoon talking with the other kids about electrical work, sharing stories about my 40 years in the trade. What I hadn't noticed was Tiffany disappearing for about an hour halfway through the party. What I hadn't seen was the woman in the navy blue suit who'd arrived right after the cake was served and left before the party ended. Jerry found that out from his daughter, who works at the insurance office downtown. The woman was Sharon Kendricks, a geriatric care consultant who specializes in family asset protection. The same Sharon Kendricks who'd been hired to assess my mental state and living situation. They'd used my grandson's birthday party as cover for a business meeting. I don't lose my temper often. 40 years of electrical work teaches you to stay calm under pressure because electricity doesn't care about your feelings. But sitting in Jerry's truck outside the party venue, looking at the business card his daughter had given us, I felt something cold and sharp move through my chest. They use Curtis, I said. Looks like it. His birthday party. Maxwell. Jerry's voice was quiet. There's more. He handed me a folder. Inside were printouts from the county courthouse website. Tiffany and Donovan had consulted with a probate attorney named Dennis Wright 2 weeks ago. The same Dennis Wright who specialized in elder care law and family asset protection. I stared at those papers for a long time. My son. My boy, who I'd taught to tie his shoes and throw a curveball and wire a three-way switch. He was part of this. Maybe he doesn't know the full picture, Jerry suggested. Maybe she's got him convinced you really are having problems. Maybe. But looking at those consultation records, seeing both their names on the appointment log, I wasn't feeling particularly generous. Jerry pulled out his phone. I'm going to make some calls. My insurance background gives me access to databases most people don't know exist. If Tiffany's done this before, or if she's got financial problems driving this, we'll find out. While Jerry worked his contacts, I drove home and sat in Margaret's chair in our living room, the same chair where she used to read her magazines, where we'd watch the evening news together for 30 years. I thought about what she'd say if she knew what was happening. Margaret never liked Tiffany much, said she smiled too much around people she wanted things from. Margaret was usually right about people. The next morning, Jerry called with information that made my blood run cold. Tiffany hadn't just accumulated $43,000 in credit card debt. She'd done it systematically over the past 18 months, right around the time she started paying extra attention to my finances. Even worse, Jerry had found records of her researching elder law attorneys online, downloading articles about signs of dementia in elderly relatives, and visiting websites about guardianship procedures. This wasn't desperate impulse. This was a calculated plan. Maxwell, Jerry said over the phone, there's something else. I ran a background check. Tiffany's previous address in Des Moines? She lived there with her elderly uncle for 8 months before he died. Natural causes, but he'd changed his will 3 months before his death, leaving everything to her instead of his kids. The room spun a little. She's done this before. Looks like it might be her pattern. I called my family doctor and scheduled a comprehensive cognitive assessment. If Tiffany wanted to question my mental state, I'd give her something official to look at. Dr. Williams could see me that afternoon. Maxwell, what prompted this request? Dr. Williams asked, reviewing my file. Your last physical showed excellent health for a man your age. I explained the situation without mentioning names. Told him I needed documentation of my mental competency for legal reasons. Dr. Williams' expression grew serious. Elder financial abuse is more common than people realize, he said. Let's run a complete battery of tests: memory, reasoning, problem-solving, cognitive function. We'll make this ironclad. 2 hours later, Dr. Williams looked at my results and shook his head. Maxwell, whatever prompted this evaluation, you can stop worrying. Your cognitive function is excellent. Better than most men your age, frankly. I'll have a formal report ready by Friday. Friday. Perfect timing. I spent the rest Of that week doing what I do best, systematic troubleshooting. I set up a recorder app on my phone and started documenting every interaction with Tiffany. When she called to check on me Thursday evening, asking if I'd remembered to take my medication, I recorded every word. When she stopped by Friday morning with groceries I hadn't asked for, talking louder than necessary, and explaining simple things like I might not understand, I documented that too. I contacted Ron Martinez, the union lawyer who'd helped us with contract negotiations for 20 years, and had him draw up an ironclad trust for my business assets. I called my insurance agent and made sure my beneficiary information was locked down tight, with multiple verification requirements for any changes. Meanwhile, Jerry was building a file that would make a prosecuting attorney proud. Financial records showing the timeline of Tiffany's debt accumulation. Browser history from her computer showing research topics about Elder. Incompetency. Phone records of calls to legal offices and consulting services. And I planned a family dinner for Sunday. Sunday afternoon, 4:30 p.m. I'd invited Donovan, Tiffany, and Curtis over for dinner. Nothing unusual about that. We'd been doing Sunday dinners since Margaret passed, but this time I had the dining room table set for 4, and Dr. Williams's cognitive assessment report sitting in a folder next to my plate. The folder also contained copies of everything Jerry had found: financial records, legal consultation documents, Sharon Kendricks's business card, Dennis Wright's contact information, and a detailed timeline showing how Tiffany's concern about my mental state had coincided perfectly with her debt problems. I made Margaret's pot roast recipe, the one that takes 4 hours and fills the house with the smell of home. If this was going to be the last normal family dinner we had for a while, I wanted it to be memorable. Donovan arrived first, looking tired. He's a good kid, 38 years old now, but still my kid, who works as an insurance agent downtown. He's got Margaret's eyes and my stubborn streak, but somewhere along the way, he'd let Tiffany do most of his thinking for him. "Hey, Dad," he said, giving me a hug that felt real enough. "House smells incredible. What you making?" "Pot roast, your mom's recipe, just like she used to make." His smile was genuine, and for a moment, I almost felt bad about what was coming. Almost. Tiffany came in behind him, all smiles and energy. She kissed my cheek and handed me a bottle of wine. "Dad Wallace, you're so sweet to cook for us. Are you sure it's not too much trouble? I know cooking can be challenging as we get older." As we get older, like she was including herself in some geriatric club. The woman was 38 years old. "No trouble at all," I said, taking the wine. "Been cooking this recipe longer than you've been alive." She blinked at that just once, but I caught it. Curtis showed up last, still wearing his work clothes from his weekend job at the hardware store. 20 years old, built like his grandfather, and sharp as a new blade. He'd been working with me at the electrical supply store since high school, learning the business from the ground up. "Grandpa, something smells incredible," he said, washing his hands at the kitchen sink. "You teaching me how to make Grandma's pot roast tonight?" "Maybe," I said. "First, we're going to have a little family discussion." We sat down to dinner, and for the first 20 minutes, everything was normal. Tiffany asked about my business, how things were going at the store. Donovan talked about work, some new accounts he'd picked up. Curtis told us about his classes at trade school, how his instructor had complimented his conduit bending technique. I watched Tiffany during dinner, really watched her, how she spoke louder when addressing me, like I might not hear properly, how she cut her meat into smaller pieces, then glanced at my plate to see if I was having trouble with mine, how she offered to refill my water glass twice, mentioning that staying hydrated is so important for older folks. Every gesture was calculated, every concern was performed. "Dad Wallace," she said, buttering her roll with exaggerated care. "Have you given any more thought to organizing your paperwork? I know it can be overwhelming, and Donovan and I would be happy to help sort through everything. Make sure nothing important gets lost." "What kind of important things?" I asked. "Oh, insurance policies, bank statements, business documents, things that families should keep track of together." Curtis looked up from his plate. "Grandpa's got everything organized. His filing system is better than most businesses I've seen." Tiffany's smile tightened just slightly. "Of course, honey, but sometimes as people age, even organized systems can become challenging to maintain." That's when I set down my fork and reached for the folder. "Before we have dessert," I said, I want to share something with you all. I opened the folder and pulled out Dr. Williams's report. This is a comprehensive cognitive assessment I had done this week. Full mental competency evaluation. The table went very quiet. Tiffany's smile didn't disappear, but it changed. Got smaller, more careful. "Dad," Donovan started, "why did you—" "Because," I said, looking directly at Tiffany, "someone's been telling people around town that I'm declining, that I'm forgetful, that maybe I'm not capable of managing my own affairs." Tiffany's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Dad Wallace, I don't know what your—" "Beverly Martinez called me Tuesday morning, told me about your visit, about your questions, about that folder you were carrying." The color started draining from Tiffany's face. Curtis looked confused, glancing between his parents and me. "I also know about Sharon Kendricks," I continued. "The geriatric consultant you hired to assess my mental state. The one you met with during Curtis's birthday party." Curtis set down his fork hard. "What?" "And I know about Dennis Wright, the probate attorney you and your father consulted with 2 weeks ago." Donovan opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at his wife, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Doubt. "Grandpa," Curtis said slowly, "what are you talking about?" I handed him Dr. Williams's report. "Your mother hired someone to prove I'm mentally incompetent so they could take control of my finances. They used your birthday party as cover for a business meeting." Curtis read the first page of the report, then looked up at his mother. "Mom, is this true?" Tiffany tried to recover. "Curtis, baby, we were just concerned about Grandpa living alone. He's getting older, and we thought maybe he needed some help managing." "I'm 62, I said, "not 82. And according to this report, my cognitive function is excellent for any age." I reached into the folder again and pulled out Jerry's financial. "Investigation. I also know about your debt situation, Tiffany. $43,000 in credit card debt. Mortgage payments 3 months behind. That's quite a motivation to go after someone else's money." The silence that followed was the kind you feel in your bones. Curtis was staring at his mother like he'd never seen her before. Donovan was looking down at his plate, his jaw tight. "How much of this did you know about?" I asked my son. Donovan's voice came out quiet. "She said you were having memory problems, said you'd gotten confused when you were working on Mrs. Peterson's wiring job last month. Said maybe we should look into options to help you." "What options?" "Legal guardianship. Just temporarily. Until you got your bearings back." I nodded slowly. "And you believe that?" Donovan looked up at me, and I saw my boy again. The kid who used to help me in the workshop, who wanted to learn everything about electricity and fixing things. "Dad, I should have talked to you directly. I'm sorry. Yes, you should have." Tiffany tried one more time. "Look, this is all being blown out of proportion. We love you, Dad Wallace. We just want what's best for the family." "Stop." Curtis's voice was sharp. "Mom, just stop talking." He stood up from the table. "You used my birthday party. My friends were there, and you were in some back room planning to take away Grandpa's money?" "Curtis, you don't understand the financial pressures we're under." "I understand plenty." He looked at me. "Grandpa, I'm sorry. I had no idea." "I know you didn't, son." Curtis grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. "I'm going for a drive. I need to think about some things." After he left, the dining room felt like a tomb. Donovan helped me clear the table without saying much. When Tiffany went to the bathroom, he said quietly, "Dad, what happens now?" "That depends on you, son. Are you going to keep letting your wife make these decisions, or are you going to start thinking for yourself?" He didn't answer right away. We stood there in my kitchen, the same kitchen where Margaret used to make Sunday dinners, where I'd taught him to scramble eggs when he was 8 years old. "I didn't know about the debt," he said finally, "the full extent of it. She's been handling our finances, said I shouldn't worry about it." When Tiffany came back, she was ready to leave. At the front door, she tried one last appeal. "Garrett, Maxwell, you have to understand, we're family. Everything we do is for family." I stood up and walked to my front window, looking out at the driveway where Donovan's car was parked next to her white sedan. Family doesn't lie to each other. Family doesn't use birthday parties as cover for legal schemes. And family sure doesn't try to steal from each other. "This isn't over," she said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "You can't cut us out forever." "I'm not cutting anyone out," I said, turning back to her. "But I'm not going to stand by and let anyone steal from me, either. Ron Martinez has all my legal affairs locked down tight now. My business, the house, Margaret's life insurance, all of it's protected in ways you can't touch. I watched them drive away through the front window. Tiffany was talking fast, gesturing with her hands. Donovan was staring straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Monday morning, Curtis showed up at my electrical supply store at 7 a.m. sharp. I was already there, checking inventory and going through the weekend receipts. The bell above the door chimed, and there he was, work boots and a serious expression. "Grandpa," he said, "I want to learn everything you can teach me about running this business, the right way, the honest way." That's when I knew everything was going to be okay. Jerry stopped by around noon with coffee and donuts from the shop down the street. "How'd it go yesterday? About like you'd expect," I said, pouring coffee into 2 paper cups. "But Curtis gets it. That's what matters. What about Donovan?" I thought about that question while I arranged some electrical components on the counter. Donovan's got some decisions to make. His wife put him in an impossible position, but he's got to figure out what kind of man he wants to be. And Tiffany's got bigger problems than me now. "Jerry, you still got contacts at the credit card companies?" He grinned. "Want me to make sure they know about her employment situation? Just want to make sure all the facts are available to the right people." A week later, Donovan called. He'd moved out of the house temporarily, was staying at his buddy's place while he figured things out. Said he'd had no idea about the extent of Tiffany's debt, about the consultant, about how far she'd been willing to go. "Dad," he said, "I owe you an apology, a big one. You owe yourself something more important," I told him. "You owe yourself a life where you make your own decisions." 3 weeks after that, Curtis and I were working on rewiring the old Murphy's department store, downtown when Donovan showed up. He looked different, lighter somehow, like he'd been carrying weight he didn't realize was there. "Dad, Curtis," he said, "mind if I buy you lunch? There are some things I need to tell you." Over sandwiches at the deli across from the job site, Donovan told us he'd filed for divorce. Said he should have listened to his gut about Tiffany years ago, but she was good at making him feel like he needed her guidance. "Funny how manipulation works," he said. "Makes you doubt your own judgment until you're depending on the person who's lying to you." Curtis finished his sandwich and looked at his father. "Dad, you want to help us finish the Murphy job? We could use an extra pair of hands, and Grandpa's been teaching me about 3-phase systems." Donovan smiled, the first real smile I'd seen from him in months. "I'd like that." 6 months later, Curtis finished his first semester at trade school with straight A's. He's working with me full-time now, learning the electrical business from the ground up. And the kid's got better instincts than I did at his age. Donovan comes by most weekends, helping with the bigger jobs, and slowly rebuilding the relationship with his son. As for Tiffany, last I heard she'd moved back to Des Moines with her sister. Turns out, when the credit card companies started looking into her employment claims and income statements, they found some interesting discrepancies. That's between her and them now. Margaret's life insurance money is sitting in a trust fund for Curtis's future. The business is profitable, and my health is better than it's been in years. Turns out, getting rid of family stress is better medicine than anything Dr. Williams could prescribe. The whole thing taught me something important. Never underestimate what people will do when they want your money, and never underestimate how much trouble you can cause them when you see it coming. Sometimes the best revenge is just being smarter than the people, trying to outsmart you, and keeping good records. Always keep good records. That's the electrician in me talking. When you're troubleshooting a problem, documentation is everything. Same goes for family problems, apparently. Curtis and I are working on a big commercial job next week, rewiring the old pharmacy downtown. Kid's already talking about expanding the business, maybe adding a security systems division. He's got Margaret's practical sense and my determination to do things right. Not bad for a declining old man, if you ask me.